Know us. I'm Nayaswamis Surendra. This is my wife, Nayaswamis Tushti, and we are very pleased to be here visiting from India. We will return in about a month. And of course, this is Nayaswami Gangamata, Nayaswami Daiva, the spiritual directors here at Ananda, Portland. I'd like to talk a little bit more about this reading today from Rays of the One Light. How high should we aspire? But before I do that, I'm going to start off in seemingly another direction, and hopefully this little side trip will find its way to a destination that makes sense at the end of the journey. Mark Twain was a colorful and complex character who wrestled throughout his life with the concept of a just and loving God. He probably, writing over 100 years ago, was unfamiliar with the word karma, but certainly not with the concept. And he often pushed the envelope, so to speak, wondering how far he might be able to go with certain urges and desires without causing himself some costly karmic result. Not unlike a lot of us, I'm sure. And there's a quote from him that really says it all very well. He said, "Some people are troubled by passages in the Bible which they do not understand. The passages that trouble me are the ones that I do understand." Yes. Like I said, this is not unlike many of us, and I'm sure one of those passages that might have been troubling to him was this one. "Your ways are not my ways, saith the Lord." Because Twain, and sometimes us, are not quite ready to choose the Lord's ways. They can, at times when we are attracted by tempting distractions of the world, they can often seem inconvenient, and we may be inclined to put them on hold temporarily as we indulge in a whim or yearning. And there are some people who wait a very long time to bring the Lord's ways into play, really pretty much until the end of the game. There's a story of the great comedian W.C. Fields. In addition to his curmudgeonly on-screen persona, Fields was well known as a lifelong atheist. And when he was in his last days, knowing that he had little time remaining, he was hospitalized in a private room where friends could come and visit and pay their respects. And so it was a huge surprise to one of his friends who entered the room and found Fields reading the Bible. He said, "Bill, what are you doing?" And Fields looked up, and in that very unforgettable voice, he said, "Looking for loopholes." How often have we also wished that there was some loophole in our karma that we might be able to escape through? But such is not the case. You know, these quotes, they're actually born of a certain anxiety from both Twain and from Fields. And yet they get a laugh. Why is that? It's because we've been there too. In some measure, at some level, we understand that it's difficult at times because of the attractions that we have to choose the Lord's ways. We have attitudes, moods, ambitions, attachments, desires that tend to compete with living a purely spiritual life, don't we? And yet, that really is the direction that we need to be going. The world as we see it is God's phenomenal dream. And He has given us free choice in how that dream unfolds, enabling us to bless or to curse ourselves by every decision and action that we make. And the predicament for us, of course, is that God's dream doesn't seem like a dream at all. It has a very definable reality, and we are in it, aren't we? Trying to ignore what that reality is, arguing with God about the way He has arranged it, or hoping that He's going to cut us some slack because we simply feel that it's too hard sometimes. That isn't going to get us any farther along than we are right now. We have to make that effort to move forward on this path. The challenges that we face are daily, they're incessant, they range from barely significant to severe. But there's one problem, one biggest problem that we all face universally and equally. What do you think that problem is? Anyone? Any ideas? What's the biggest problem that every one of us faces equally?
Trying to remember.
Yeah, there we go. Ego, that's certainly part of it too. But, yeah, ignorance. But actually the biggest problem of all that we share is so obvious that it's easy to overlook. we're still here. If we, had, if we were free of delusion, we would be somewhere else immersed in a sea of bliss. But we're not. We are where we are as we are because we have a ways to go. There was a class that Nayaswami Shivani recently gave in Pune. And she talked about what happens when we die. And what she said has been confirmed by people who have had a near-death experience, confirmed repeatedly. People who were then, of course, returned to this world for one reason or another. And what they all said while they were on the other side is that they had to appear for a life review. And in that life review, there were 2 questions that were asked. There was no mention of how many extra hours they worked late at the office. No question about how much wealth they had acquired or whether they had excelled at some particular skill. The 2 questions were simply this: what did you learn and how much did you love? What did you learn and how much did you love? And so we come finally to the topic of today's reading from Ray's. How high should we aspire? Well, if the goal is freedom, who would aspire to achieving anything less? But the fact is that we spend a great deal of our time in pursuits of limitation instead. We do that, don't we? And as we do that, we create that barrier between us and the Lord's ways. It's a challenge. It's a very difficult challenge for some of the things that everybody said: ignorance, ego, trying to remember who we really are. But finally, thankfully, we get the message. Lasting happiness is not of this world. We have to move forward, and we do by looking more deeply inward now at where our true happiness lies. But there's a caveat that goes with this too, because it takes time. Master Yogananda, that patience is the fastest route to God. And this is one of the hardest lessons for us to learn. There are very necessary stages of development that we all have to go through. And there again, it's a question of effort and aspiration. How much are we going to do? Toward the end of his life, Swami Kriyananda urged us to break the chains of limitation that we impose on ourselves. And I have never known anyone who has set a better example of exactly how to go about that. Swamiji was the epitome of grace under fire. And despite all of the accusations, betrayals, the physical pain, he was always creative, energetic, never allowed anything to disturb his peace of mind, and was the most blissful person that I have ever known. And if any of you have had the good fortune to know him, you know that very well also. All of us, like Mark Twain and W.C. Fields, would gladly delete from our curriculum some of the more demanding challenges in the scriptures. But, you know, that is not how this experience has been designed. And you know also very well, I'm sure, that whatever it is that upsets you is there for two reasons. Number one, you have something to learn from the experience. And number two, you need to bring more love into the picture, because love conquers all. As we aspire to move beyond our limitations, our desires, worldly desires, and our attachments, we know that we can put forth that energy. And that energy operates against resistance in the same way that a swift river moves away all eddies of debris that accumulate along its banks. And as that energy gains momentum, it brings more inspiration, more joy, and accumulating success. But of course, once again, it is we who have to do the work. How much did you love? What did you learn? In these two questions lies the totality of what this life is really all about. Did you learn that people are more important than things? That right action brings right results? That love is all that God has ever wanted from us, expressed through everything that we do. Aspire to learn as much as you can, to love as much as you can, and give it your best shot. You won't be disappointed. God bless.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tushti, and I have an interesting voice this morning. I could say minister gives talk under the influence, but I'd have to add cold medicine. So don't take it out of context. You know, it's interesting. We don't have a television. We haven't had one for a long time. And we visited my sister in Texas, my mother, and they watch a lot of television. And, you know, just the old programs we used to watch. And one of the ones I used to watch when I was very young, this was many, many years ago, was called Mission Impossible. Some of you might remember it, and some of you may have never heard of it. But in Mission Impossible, the main character's name was Jim. And he worked for the CIA, or the Secret Service. And every week he would receive a phone call in some obscure place around the world. And he was given the details of his next mission. Well, if he chose to accept the mission, then he would be given some clues that would help him along the way. And he was also warned that it's a dangerous mission, and perhaps he wouldn't even survive. Well, you know, Jim stood in the light of Dharma, and he always accepted his mission. And he always survived. So I was thinking, you know, our lives aren't too much different than that. You know, we've been given a call from Master, from Swamiji, and they've set us on a path, a course of self-realization. The mission is to know God. And Swami has given us many clues as he shared the teachings with us and in the great writings. And in Swami's music, if we pay attention to the lyrics. He's giving us so many clues. Life is a dream. Brothers, if you're seeking freedom. And then one of my favorites is Chant of the Angels, and here it is. Life is a mission from on high. Life is a quest for inner joy. And that's where we're striving to achieve that very thing. Now, sometimes, when we accept that mission, by the way, and by accepting that mission, we took on certain responsibilities. Now, when the ego is born, when the soul is identifying with the body, with this form, and it can really begin to take us away from where we want to go when we let our energy flow out through the self-definitions. When we identify with the little self, the I, me, mine, my, that's not who we really are. I have achieved. I'm in control. Now that's a real big joke. Man plans, God laughs. It's so true. How many times have you started out with one thing in mind for the day and out it went? So we want to give each day to God. But we don't want to be that one that's always trying to hold on to something. It's all about to have a joyful experience and be successful on our mission is we have to know that God's hand is holding us up through everything that comes our way. Now we will have challenges. There will be pitfalls. We'll be hurt and we'll be sorrowful. And how do we take that? What do we do with that? We keep marching on. Our affirmation this week was on humility. And humility is the truthfulness. It's really recognizing that God is the doer. It makes our life so much simpler when we realize that. It's surrendering, and that's not always easy. Swami said that humility is truthfulness. And that's really self-study, and more importantly, self-honesty. And sometimes that can be challenging in itself. To be honest with our feelings and to stand in our truth. And Swami also said something very powerful and to hold on to. When we are unkind with another person, so we are treating God. And now, because God resides in each and every one of us. And, that could be our thoughts, that could be our words, that could be our actions or deeds. When we are unkind to another person, so we are treating God. Now, humility comes into play and is very important because it's complete surrender and giving our lives in service to God. We went to the village and had a beautiful weekend over Easter there. And we also had an opportunity to take a little seclusion. And we always take the same cabins. He takes peace of mind and I take devotion. They're the last cabins on the road. You're not going to see anybody else. That's why we go. Just to be quiet and to spend time with God. And I would take an afternoon walk. And one day I was walking, it was rather hot actually. And so I just stepped under a tree and I was enjoying the scenes around me and actually the shade of this beautiful tree. And I looked around and there were little acorns on the ground. And so I picked this one up. And I was thinking, how small. But in this little acorn, there is an innate wisdom. And there's a power. And there's a potential to become a magnificent oak tree. Now, we're no different. Within us, the spark of the divine, we have an innate wisdom to look for our home and to step on that path. We have the power, and so that's a potential. And how do we energize that energy and power within us? Well, prayer, meditation, community, service, so many ways. And one thing that Swami said was, when you meditate, don't meditate for joy, meditate with joy. When we meditate with joy, it creates a magnetism, it's a positive energy. And when we do that, then that draws the energy and the positive light of God. That's the way, that's the law of magnetism, that's the way it works. And so you see, we have to be willing to put the energy out to reach our potential to become sons of God. And there was another thought. When we give ourselves in that way, again, it's God's hand that's going to lift us up. You know, sometimes when it's really, really hard, we say, "Where are you, God?" But there was a beautiful poem written, it was Footsteps in the Sand. And this man says, you know, you promised, Lord, that when I came to you and prayed with you, you would always walk along my side. And we would leave footprints in the sand. So when the challenging times come, and I was so down and alone, where were you? And the Lord said, when you saw only one set of footprints, that was when I was carrying you. And isn't that so true? Sometimes during the challenging times we forget of the presence, but it's even there more deeply if we would just call on it. Transcending the ego is our challenge, and we just have to give it up. You know, we just have to give it up. Don't shoot it. Don't try to run it out of town. We have to work with it, and it will uplift us as well. There was, you know, just naughty or good, no matter what, we're God's children. And I just will close with a story that Davy shared once. It was when her little boy was just a wee one. And you might have heard this story, but it's just so sweet. He had discovered her vitamins in the closet. And so, you know, vitamins are come in a jar and you can shake them, and they're different shapes and different colors, and what fun. Well, he opened them all up and threw them on the floor and played with them, you know. And then he realized, uh-oh, just like we do, I could be into trouble here. And so he went to his mom and he said, "Mommy, I didn't do nothing." And Davy in her wisdom said, "Oh, where didn't you do nothing?" "In the closet." You know, we just have to give it up. It's so simple. Divine Mother knows all our shortcomings, our foibles, and all those things. And her love for us is unconditional. Absolutely, no matter what. Unconditional. So we take her hand and we walk in her divine presence every day, each day. God remembrance is the secret key. It opens our heart and it helps us to face any challenges. How high should we aspire? To the top of the mountain, because we'll have God by our side. God bless.
Ruler of every heart. see